Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today I'm speaking with Marco Carducci. If his name sounds familiar, it's because he's a professional soccer player here in Canada. He's also passionate about men's health. That's because earlier this year, at the age of 25, Marco was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Now he's on a mission to change the way men advocate for their own health. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Marco. It's great to see you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited about this conversation. So let's start off with who you are, because unless you're a soccer fan, I think that, a lot of people will maybe haven't heard your name before, but for people who are into soccer, they will definitely recognize your name. So you're a professional soccer goalkeeper, and you play in Canada.
That's right. Yeah, I've been a soccer player all my life. Lucky enough to be doing it professionally now. And I play currently for Cavalry FC, which is a team here in Calgary in the Canadian Premier League.
So now explain, just for people who don't know, because I don't understand the different leagues, right? So I'm in Vancouver.
Yeah.
We have the Whitecaps. Is that the same league or a different league?
It's a very fair question, Tamara. In Canada, there's the MLS. So the MLS itself is an American league with three Canadian franchises, three Canadian teams. So you have the Vancouver Whitecaps, you have Toronto FC, and you have Montreal Impact, or FC Montreal as they're now known. The Canadian Premier League is separate from the MLS. We play in a different league, which is the CPL, the Canadian Premier League. It started in 2019, so it is essentially Canada's first division. So there are 8 teams in the league from coast to coast. We play amongst each other. Where some of the confusion comes in is we have played in a separate competition called the Canadian Championship. This is a very common thing in the world of soccer, where, CPL teams will compete against those MLS teams. For example, with Cavalry, we've played against the Whitecaps a couple times in the Canadian Championship. So sometimes people are like, wait, are you in this league or you're not? So they're two separate leagues, but the Canadian Premier League is Canada's first division.
Okay, awesome. So, we've all been watching the World Cup, and it's on 24/7 in our house. And I know by the time that, our conversation airs, the World Cup will be all over. And but it's pretty exciting to watch. Are you excited about, the future of soccer in Canada?
I couldn't be more excited. Obviously, the men making the World Cup for the first time in 36 years is a very big deal. The amount of growth has truly been exponential. And if we look back over the last decade plus, if you look at the women's program, they have been blazing the trail. They back-to-back bronze medalists in the Olympics and then gold medal in Tokyo. It's been incredible. The amount of growth, the Canadian Premier League has played its part in that. So everything's pointing in the right direction. The amount of success we've had recently, I think, is just testament to all those things. And I'm super excited to see where the sport is in the next, 3, 5, 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's put soccer aside for a second. We'll get back to soccer in a few minutes.
Sure.
But let's talk about men's health. Let's talk about cancer. And you're young, Marco. I usually don't ask people how old they are, but how old are you?
I'm 26.
Okay. So you're 26 and you've already had cancer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to imagine looking at you and listening to you. You're, an elite athlete, young. And tell us why don't you start with, how did you know something was wrong?
Yeah, I think I would just kind of echo that point. When I was diagnosed, I was still 25. So it was earlier this year. And my mindset, not just as an elite athlete, but also as a young man, myself, I think I would throw myself in this category with a lot of other young men. You kind of just think you're invincible. And this is not something we ever really talk about. Certainly not in the world of professional sport. where you ever question or doubt your physical body and your health, because at the end of the day, your physical body is kind of your livelihood, right? It certainly is mine. And kind of trying to untangle that real connectedness between, for me, being healthy and active and strong and fit. The thought of cancer was like, yeah, I've seen it. It's touched us all one way or another, family and friends, and I've seen it. But I said, but surely not me. But to circle it back to your question, again, earlier this year, it was in kind of January, February. So now we're close to a year, which is crazy. It's been a whirlwind for sure. But in around January, I started to notice something felt a bit off. For the most part, I felt really good otherwise, though. I was in the off season. I was training. I was in the gym a bunch, kind of prepping for the season, and that ramping up. I was excited and feeling really good. But there was something that was off, and I recognized it. For me, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer, so I started to notice something down there. And of course, it's not a Sunday lunch topic of discussion where you're like, yeah, I've noticed this thing. So I obviously kept it kind of to myself for the most part. I owe so much gratitude to my girlfriend who was with me, and she was the only one who kind of knew the whole way. And I kept her in the loop, and we were very open about it, which was ultimately not only really helpful for me, but again, potentially, got me the treatment that I needed that thankfully caught this early, and could have had a big effect on my life for sure. But yeah, I started to notice something felt wrong. And again, it was hard for me to even acknowledge it because I was worried what it would mean for my season, my career, all these other things. And I said, typically you go, I'm fine. It'll take care of itself. It's not this thing. I'm, playing doctor on the internet, Googling what this could be. That's a terrible idea. But I think we all do it. But one way or another, I knew something was wrong. I felt different. I felt it physically. It felt different. I felt aches and pains that were uncommon. And that's what made me say, you know what, this is something I should go get checked out. And I did.
Okay. So I know it's really, the thing about cancer is that it is hard to talk about for a bunch of different reasons, right? And you're coming up on 1 year because there's so many layers to it. There's the emotional part, right? Like you've faced something now emotionally that, like you said, we do live our lives like we are invincible. We all know we're going to die, right? Eventually, but in our heads, it's a long ways away and a long, long way. And we don't, it's just not how we live our lives, in fear of that all the time. But we're also talking about a body part that, like you said, we don't sit around and talk about. I have a friend that had anal cancer. Like, she never wants to talk about it. But if we don't talk about these things, how would I ever know if I had a problem, or how would I, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, this is where the gift of talking about it helps others, right? So I'm saying that because I want to just circle back to what you said about you felt different. Did you feel tired? Did you feel grumpy? Like, what do you mean by that? Or are you talking physically, your testicles felt different? Like a woman finds a lump in her breast and then goes to the doctor and says, I think I have a lump. Is it a lump that you felt?
Yeah. And real quick before I get to it, I think it is so important. This whole experience for me has, I really easily could have gotten the treatment I did, got the surgery, missed training, and never said a word. My teammates, I could have told them, it was during COVID, and I could have said I had COVID, that's why I couldn't come to training for a few days, and then I had this hernia or this groin injury, and I needed a surgery, and I'll be back in a few weeks. That was going to do no good because I was like, this happened to me. Testicular cancer is the young man's cancer, between 15 and roughly 35 to 40 years old. It's the most common. And again, it can happen to anybody. It happened to be me. I look around my teammates, my colleagues, my peers, players I play against. It could have been anyone else, and it could still be. And I thought, if I don't be open about it, we're losing so much. So I digress. I just think that's so important because that was definitely a big part of my thought process. But yeah, I actually, again, and one of the hard parts for me, Tamara, was that I felt fine, like I said, for the most part. I didn't feel tired. I didn't feel weak. I was actually in the gym a bunch, right? Again, in the off-season mode, working really hard. I was strong, I was fit. But it was the physical difference I noticed. So again, I think being really open about it is very, very important. The first thing I really remember noticing was actually an ache. It was very dull, but it was not normal. And again, I kind of thought, well, this could be this or that. And as men and guys, we kind of know there's some things that might cause that, and you're just like, okay, well, that's strange. It'll come and it'll go. It lasted longer than I thought, so that was a bit worrying. And then it actually did kind of subside. But then, and as you know, this is an important part of the message. Self-checking is so important, and it's really easy. In the shower, nice and warm is a good way to do it, and just feeling the testicle. And for me, that's when I noticed that the surface of it felt different. It wasn't, so abnormal, but it felt harder, and it did feel like a little bit of a bump was forming. It was kind of over the whole surface on one side, and it felt hard. And again, we know as guys, you should be feeling down there to make sure. And the same way you talk about breast cancer for women, that self-checking is the first step. And so after I had that kind of ache, I felt it up and I said, that doesn't feel quite right. And that's when I kind of got a little more worried. And then I do really remember, and I said, okay, well, I'll go see the doctor, but it's not like such a rush. And then one day I was just sitting there, and I remember I was at dinner with some friends, and that ache came back, and it came back like really, really sharply. It was significant. It was way less dull than it was at first. And I said, okay, something is going on down there. I felt the difference. It felt harder. Again, it should feel pretty soft, and it didn't. And at that point, I said, something is going on. I'll go see my doctor. I did, and thankfully, really quickly, he checked it out and said, there could be a few things going on. Let's get an ultrasound, which is really step one in terms of the diagnostic imaging side. And then that's where I went, got my ultrasound, and then the rest of the journey started.
So is that how it's diagnosed typically, is with an ultrasound? It's not a blood test.
Yeah.
Like I know with prostate cancer now, we have a blood test where we can look at those, levels. And so it's different.
For me, it was the ultrasound, and typically the ultrasound is as far as I'm aware, I'm no doctor, I'm not a medical expert, but from my experience and kind of what I remember, that is typically step one. After we had done the ultrasound, this is where things got really crazy. It was an ultrasound. I was training again, feeling normal. I was like, all right, I'll go do this ultrasound. It's admittedly an awkward ultrasound to do, but you're laying there and they're ultrasounding the testicle, and I leave thinking, okay, well, whatever, I'll get the results when I get the results. But I got the call from the doctor's office the next morning, which obviously was urgent news. And he called me in and said, can you please come as soon as possible? That's when they, could diagnose that it was testicular cancer. It was highly, highly indicative of it. The tumor that was present was there and visible because of the ultrasound. But after that, to kind of circle back to the blood work, after I had gone to the hospital and they did some initial testing, after that point, the blood work did show elevated levels. So even there of some of the tumor markers. So we saw it first via an ultrasound, and then they were like, okay, so we're seeing the blood is kind of showing that. But, thankfully for me, I did a CT scan too. That was a really scary time. You don't really know. I didn't know the extent of it. So all of a sudden I go from being like, I'm fine, there's just this thing going on, to it's testicular cancer, to has it spread? What's my treatment? What's next? And again, thankfully we got on it really, really quickly, but that's typically the process. Yeah.
And so do they, with testicular cancer, do they stage it like they do? Like you'll hear somebody say, oh, they have stage 2 breast cancer, or is that the same? Did that happen with you? Was that your experience?
You know what? Yes, is the answer. They do. I couldn't even tell you what they staged mine at because it all happened so fast. I'm sure they said something and I didn't even catch it. Gratefully, I do know they kind of made it really clear to me. The doctors, they said, after we had done the initial CT and blood work, they were pretty confident that it was contained. And therefore, it was as simple as, we're getting you in surgery as soon as possible. And they remove the testicle completely. And then, you go from there. And again, thankfully, and actually, today's December 1st when we're recording this. I just got back this morning from some blood work. It's still a part of my life. I'm in the system where we're now monitoring, which is still new to me in a lot of ways, but thankfully, after the surgery was done and since that point, there's been no indication of any spread. And now it's just monitoring it and keeping my eye out.
So how did your teammates and your friends react to this news?
I remember actually having a Zoom call with the team. The team was in the middle of preseason training, which is very intense. And again, I missed one day of training and some people go, oh, okay, well, maybe he was sick. And again, maybe it's COVID. We weren't so, I remember early on, it was like crazy, but then it was like, it happens and the guy will be, you have to be away from the team for a few days. So I think at first there was a lot of uncertainty. They were just like, that's weird. Marco missed a day. Okay, that's normal. Then it was another day. Then that got a bit weird because, missing a couple of days of training, it doesn't happen unless, again, there's something going on. And I remember communicating. The only people who knew right off the bat from the team were was kind of the medical team, my physio, my team doctor, and the coaching staff, because I wanted to tell them so that they were aware of what was going on. And what I'll quickly say is they were so incredibly supportive, which was really, really important for me. And I'm so grateful for that. But my teammates, I remember saying, I'd like to tell the guys. I waited a bit. I was back home. I was in my recovery. Surgery had been done. I was on my way back. And I just remember being so nervous saying it to the guys. It was just like this, right? I was sitting on a Zoom call. We've all gotten very used to it, something similar to it. And I think a couple of the guys did know. I remember having some conversations with some of the guys, maybe a day or two in advance, or maybe even just hours in advance, just so that they were aware. They were obviously very shocked, but again, the outpouring of support and love and kind of everything, those kind of moments really show how important teammates are. And for me, those guys are the people I spend a lot of time with, sometimes more than I'd like. And they again were just so supportive. Of course, it was a shock, and some people were scared and they didn't know what that meant. And again, immediately after, I'm getting phone calls and text messages from everybody. And then it was again just great to see them, and they saw that I was doing okay and on the way back. And before I knew it, I was kind of back into the regular day-to-day of training. Yeah.
So what about? Did your treatment? So did the surgery? Did the surgery take care of? Like, did they feel they got all the cancer, and then therefore you didn't have to have any chemo or radiation, or did you have to have any treatment besides the surgery?
It was just the surgery. So again, thankfully, once that was done, they did the pathology. They got the results back, and then they were pretty confident that it was contained. Which again, especially with this type of surgery, with testicular prostate as well for men, early detection is so important. And
key.
Thankfully, and thankfully we detected it quite early. And again, I'm still in the system. I'm still getting my checkups pretty regularly, and as things time continues to go on, it'll be a bit less and less. But I only had to do the surgery, and once that was done, I was just again back out.
And when you say, "Oh, I just had to do the surgery," it's still a massive deal. You know what I mean? Like that is a big thing. And I also find sometimes, when talking with people who have had cancer or are still, in the system of getting care, it's we end up talking about it like, oh, but it's okay because, or, oh, it's like, but it actually, the emotional toll that it takes on someone, because you're still in survival mode, right? Like I think our brains work in a way where you've got to be strong and get through this and take care of your body and all these things that we tell ourselves, right? To get through it, to get to the other side. But it takes a huge emotional, it pummels us. It pummels our emotion and Yeah, it's very interesting. And I say this from experience. I shared with you before we started recording that I had cancer too. And it was, I still, now that I'm, a decade on the other side of it, I still always worry that it'll come back, And so I wonder, like, are do you find that you're putting yourself, this all in compartments in your brain, or are you like, do you know what I mean? Like, you're an athlete. So I'm wondering, how does your athletic brain that you use so well for your work, how do you use that for your, this journey through cancer?
Well, what I'll say is it is really tough. And I certainly still do struggle with this. I kind of felt an imposter syndrome. I think that's the best way to put it. My experience was scary and emotionally really difficult, and still is. Every time I go for those checkups and get the phone calls and say, waiting for results, I'm scared. Thank you for sharing that, because 10 years or 1 year, it's still always there. And yeah, I think it's kind of like, maybe for me, it's a little bit of an autopilot, where there are times when I just forget. But, one thing I've found to be really, really, really helpful is talking about it. Because anytime I find that I'm just holding on to those feelings, holding on to that fear or that uncertainty that, yeah, I do fear that there maybe it will come back. Maybe it'll show up somewhere else. Again, before I was like, never could happen to me. Now all of a sudden I'm like, anything could happen to me, which I guess is a blessing and a curse, right? But I think I've just been really, really fortunate to have such an incredible support network. Again, starting right here at home with my partner, with my family, with my teammates, with just the greater soccer community. When I went public, just kind of knowing that support was there, it allowed me to, like you said, just shift my mind and be like, okay, well, when I'm being an athlete, when I'm playing and training and doing those things, I can still focus on that completely. But I still have that outlet and that vulnerability that I'm allowed to express and feel, which I think is so important when those doubts sink back in, as they inevitably do,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so I have so many more questions for you, but before we do that, we like to thank our guests for being here by asking them to choose a Canadian charity, registered charity of their choice. You chose One Ball. I mean, it is the best name for a charity. So One Ball is a charity founded and run by testicular cancer survivors, and they provide direct financial support and resources to men diagnosed with testicular cancer. So we will be giving them $500 for you being here. So thank you very much for choosing them. And it's, I mean, I've never heard of One Ball. Why would I? You know what I mean? And I think it's really important, again, I love the name of it. Like that is, it's just putting it out there. Like it is what it is, right? Like if we don't talk about this stuff, people will die.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you. And I'm so glad to support One Ball. Again, just like what you had just said, I had no idea they existed before this happened to me either. Someone reached out to me via Instagram about it, as someone who actually one of the members of the board, I believe, and I got in touch with them, and just first of all, the work they do is incredible. The financial support is meaningful. Thankfully, this wasn't the case for me either, but when you are faced with something like this, it really tests a lot of things, especially as a man, right? Your masculinity comes into question, and that's already a difficult topic. I remember when I was diagnosed, I said, well, okay, so you're going to do this surgery, which means you're going to remove the testicle. So that's already tough. Hence One Ball. So we like to call each other fellow One Ballers. And yeah, it is important to talk about it, because you otherwise wouldn't. You don't go around saying this. And, for me, again, I thought, well, what does this mean for, as an athlete, my testosterone levels? I had no idea. I said, does this affect me? Will it affect my career? I wasn't thinking about it. Still a long ways off, but all of a sudden I'm questioning, what about my fertility? Can I have kids? All these things. And unfortunately, for a lot of men who are diagnosed with this, those questions come very quickly. And financially, it's not cheap, right? If you want to get, if you need chemo or radiation, that can affect your fertility. If this affects you, and when you're older, that can affect your fertility as well. There's a variety of things that all of a sudden you might now be faced with this huge financial burden to say, well, maybe I want to have kids in the future and I haven't yet. And anyway, One Ball provides that financial support, which is incredible because, again, these are life-changing decisions that sometimes you have to make on the fly, which is not easy. But the biggest thing I think that they do, which I really love, is, and hence the name again, is they allow men to approach it with that little bit of sense of humor. It's still scary, it's tough, it's cancer, it's terrifying, but talking about it and being able to be open about it, I know for me it helped massively. Again, to say, yeah, this happened. I am now a one baller, and you know what? It's important to talk about it because there are many others out there, and hopefully, this helps those who might go through the same thing.
So testicular cancer is one of the most common but treatable forms of cancer for men. And as you said, age 15 to 35. So I think about, my son's 15. I had no idea that this was such a young man's cancer, typically, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, did anybody, when you were growing up, tell you that you should be checking your testicles? I don't know. I don't have them, so I have no idea. I know with breasts, we're taught all the time, right? This is what, but there's also that's been a very public awareness campaign for breast cancer. I've not seen the same thing for testicular cancer.
You know what? So on my own level, I don't know who or when, but I feel like thankfully, somehow, somewhere, I knew that it was important, right? I knew it was a really simple and easy way. Again, every now and again, when you're in the shower, just feel down there and check it out. I think it may have been a family doctor when I was young, or a doctor that I worked with in sport. Whoever it was, I'm grateful for, because I at least had that in the back of my mind. But to your point, it doesn't have that same publicity, and I don't know exactly why. But I have an inclination, again, that it all ties back to, as men, it is really, really challenging, really difficult to express any vulnerability, to acknowledge that you might be sick or you should go get something checked out. And something like this is so preventable that, again, it literally saves lives just to be able to talk about it.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And I think we know when something's wrong with our body. We know. And if we can't, even if you can't recognize it or say it out loud at that time, once you get to the other side of it, you can look back and go, oh my gosh, I knew at that time when that pain, and it was sharp, and it was like just how you did when you were like, oh gosh, and that happened. We know, right? And you had been, even in your own brain, been going, oh, I'm sure it's nothing, or oh yeah, this is kind of weird, but and then it went away, and then it came back, right? That pain. And it's the same, we've mentioned prostate cancer a couple of times here. Again, another, men's cancer, not in the most, glamorous part of the body by any means,
Yeah.
And so when my husband turned 40, as a gift, I made him an appointment at the family doctor for a prostate exam. And so it was like, happy birthday. Oh, by the way, you have an appointment today at 10 a.m. at the doctor's. And he's like, why? And I said, for a prostate exam. And he's like, what? And I said, I knew he wouldn't do it. I knew he wouldn't make that appointment. Not because he doesn't care, but it's just like you said, right? It's this, and I get it. I get it. It's like women have to go for pap tests. We go for mammograms. These are all things that are not enjoyable. They're just not enjoyable. But if we don't normalize it, if we don't talk about it openly, this is how people die, just like you said. So what do you say to young, either young men that are listening or even teenage boys that are listening?
Yeah. It's hard to sum it all up, but I think doing my best, I would say it all circles back to that, right? We're facing this uphill battle that I think unless the perception of it and that openness to have really, really honest dialogue and be okay with it is so important. When I think about young men or teenage boys, right? I think about myself at 15, 16, 17 years old, much like I was when I was 25 before this had happened to me. Again, you kind of feel like you're on top of the world. Obviously, there's a lot of changes and whatnot that happen at that point in your life, but the last thing you think of is something like this happening. But it really, for me, all comes back down to this culture and what society kind of expects of men, and what we expect of men as men. It's so difficult. Again, I see it through the lens of elite sport, where the faintest hint of vulnerability is shunned, right? And that has to change, and that's something I'm really passionate about trying to work on now. I live and work in that environment. I've been in that environment since I was a boy, and now I make my living being in that environment. And it doesn't have to be that way. Vulnerability, being able to kind of change our perception of what it means to be a man and a masculine man. It doesn't mean you have to be like, oh no, I'm fine, I'll tough through it. You're here, right? If you go into the locker room and say, you know what, I'm not, this extends beyond physical health, by the way. Mental health is so important too. And again, any hint of, I'm feeling down or I'm a bit anxious, that is really, really difficult to do, because the fear of, again, any of the backlash from that is real. And it's difficult as a young man, as a man in general, to acknowledge that. That has to change. And I think that starts really young. And I hope, again, by sharing this message that, when we have our young boys becoming men, that their mindset shifts on that, where they're not like, I'm just going to dig everything deep and hold on to it, and physical health, mental health, I'm fine, nothing to worry about, lest I show any vulnerability. If we change that, then I think things will change for the better.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you. And I really do think, by you being so transparent and giving with your experience, that you will save lives, Marco. I mean, it's just, this conversation could save a life, if it's really, I know it's not easy to do, right? It's not easy to do. And so I really do appreciate that. And before we go, I just want to ask, okay, so when we think about the 2026 World Cup.
Yes.
Tell me how you personally feel about, what do you feel when you think about the World Cup coming to Canada?
I am super excited. I've said this publicly. I want to be there. I want to be on that team. That's the goal. But it's awesome. I think the fact that Canada, the men's team, made it to Qatar 2022 is a feat in itself, and that team has changed the way people perceive this national team and this program. The women have been crushing it, and they've been doing it for years, and I think it's awesome to see the men kind of follow in their footsteps. But the way we approach this sport is growing massively, and now there's really big expectations. But 2026, 4 years away, a lot of time for all these players to continue to grow. We have such a young, exciting team that 4 years of experience, this World Cup experience already, it's going to do us a lot of good. So I'm just really excited for it, just as a lover of the sport. But again, someone who wants to be there, it's a really exciting time for soccer in this country.
Well, I hope we get to see you there. I really do. I hope we get to see you in gold there.
Thank you.
Marco, you are on Instagram and Twitter at mcarducci, that's CARDUCCI 96. So Twitter and Instagram at mcarducci96. Marco, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you for having me, and thank you for what you do with this platform.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.